Ron Ganrud, candidate. Craig Glover, candidate, are out serving the public this evening. We received a telephone call at 4:30. They're protecting the public's safety. Their investigation will continue for some time. Should they be able to join us, they will, but they do believe they will not be able to. So with that in mind, we are going to proceed. We're also pleased to welcome our live audience this evening and citizens who may be watching us at home. We want to thank the City Council of Winona and the City Chambers for allowing us to hold this educational forum in the chambers. For those of you watching at home, we do want you to call in your questions for these three fine candidates. The call number is 457-8280. The phones are manned right now. You may begin to call. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, voluntary organization organized at the local, state, and national level to encourage citizens to participate in government. While as a league we do studies and we do take stands on issues, we do not endorse or support political parties, candidates, or tell the voters how to answer referendum questions. This form is intended to provide voters with information so they can make an educated choice on the ballot. The views expressed at this forum are those of the candidates. We do encourage our members as individuals, as we encourage anyone who's of voting age to be involved in your community. Our timekeeper for this evening is Stephanie Nuttall. She will allow the candidates a 2-minute opening statement, for the questions a 1-minute response, and a closing statement of 1 minute. We do have forum ground rules. Those were available for the candidates in advance of this evening, as well as copies are here for the public if you wish them. I just want to highlight a couple of them. The audience is expected to be courteous and good listeners. This is a live TV broadcast, and I've appreciated them being prepared for this portion so far. The audience is asked not to express or support a concern during the forum, and to please hold their applause till the end of the forum. We would like to remind everybody again to please turn off your cell phones and your pagers. Pictures and videotaping are not authorized by the League. That's prohibited. However, the League is taping this forum, and we do have copies available, and we will try to rebroadcast it entirely in accordance with FCC regulations. The candidates may not use this educational video in campaign ads or literature. So during this forum now, we ask the members present to please write down your questions, or for you to call in 457-8280. The League will have question sorters, and they will select the questions and pass them on to the moderator. The moderator may modify if so choosing. So our question sorters this evening are Lori Ortega, Susan Rorick, and Will Rader, all members of the League. Candidates have agreed for me to use their first names, and so we would like to begin with opening statements, and we're just simply going to go alphabetical order. So, Rodney, would you please start with your opening statement?
My name's Rod Hansen. I'm a lifelong resident of Winona County. I served 4 years in the Navy. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I started my law enforcement career with the county in 96, or 94 rather, and I went to Lewiston in 96 as a patrolman, and I was chief of police up there for 3 years after that. I came to the county in 2000, and I was with them for 14 years. I'm married and have 2 sons, adult sons, who one lives in the area and one doesn't anymore. I believe that I can do a good job as the sheriff of this county, and I've had plenty of training and spent a lot of time dealing with different people and different countries and different ethnicities, and I think I can handle the job and do a good job.
Thank you, Rodney. Gary.
My name is Gary Hepner. I am a lifelong resident also of Winona County. I worked 25 years at the Winona Police Department, the last 14 years as a shift supervisor, a sergeant. I worked the midnight shift, afternoon shift, and day shift. Also worked as a school liaison officer at Winona Senior High and Winona Middle School for a short period. I'm involved in the community as far as I'm a board member at Winona State University on the Warrior Club. I have been involved with Winona Legion baseball program for 30 years, 25 years as a head coach, and the last 5 years as a business manager. My father was a lifelong Winona resident, was a firefighter for 37 years. My mother worked at the school district for 30 years. We've been in Winona our whole life. I've grown up in Winona County. Did my internship actually back with Winona County Sheriff's Department while I was in college at Winona State, where I received a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. I feel I could do a good job. I have a good account of what happens in the city and the county. I've worked with both departments closely, and as a supervisor for 14 years, I've had a lot of contact and a lot of work in supervising, scheduling, and various aspects of supervision and direction. And I think I would do a good job, and look forward to possibly being Sheriff of Winona County. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Before we proceed, Bill, please be sure to talk into your microphones. Our TV callers are already having issues hearing you, so please do. Bill.
Bill Spitzer, I would like to begin by thanking, I'm at 1 minute already? Boy, that was quick. I would like to begin by thanking the sponsors of this forum. The right to choose your leaders is very important and is matched by the responsibility of making a good selection. Forums like this is one way that we can learn more about the candidates and about the issues and enable the voters to make the right decision. What sets my candidacy apart, I think, is my experience. Everyone on the ballot has been in law enforcement. Everyone on the ballot has some management experience. But there are two entries on my resume that I think set me apart. First, I've been committed to crime prevention for the last 3 decades. Let's face it, enforcing the law is very expensive, but it must be done and done right. But when we arrest that same person time and time again, and they eat up time, tax dollars appropriated to law enforcement, the court system, and corrections, then it is clear that we must find a better way. Crime prevention is part of that solution. I spent 15 years in the DARE program talking to the youth about the harmful effects of drugs. Sometimes those kids got into some criminal behavior that was just costly nuisances, but sometimes it was very serious offenses. We need to make partnerships to help those organizations to develop a lot more. I also support new programs like the CARE program and drug court. Secondly, my leadership experience, something that no one else in the race has. I've served for the mayor of St. Charles for the last 10 years. I've established a public service record. Then I went back to the voters and asked them to evaluate me. 4 times I was reelected. That's what I did as the mayor of St. Charles. That's what the voters told me I did. And that's what I will do as your next sheriff.
Thank you, Bill. Now we're ready for our first question. We will start with Gary, but if any of you need the question repeated, please just ask. So the first question, Gary, is what leadership skills do you possess that will help you run the Sheriff's Department office in Winona County?
Like I mentioned, I have worked in law enforcement, and I have been a supervisor for the past 14 years as a shift supervisor, a sergeant on the Winona Police Department. Started out working and supervising on the midnight shift, then went to an afternoon shift, and then finished on a day shift as far as supervision. In charge of scheduling, in charge of the shift coverage. We were responsible for paperwork that was sent over to the city attorney or county attorney's office. Also responsible just for making sure the reports were done correctly before those got sent off, and pretty much 14 years of, on-the-job training as far as that goes for supervision work.
Thank you. Bill?
Leadership skills. Basically, for the last 10 years, I've been the mayor of St. Charles. It's been a very good opportunity for me to learn how to be a leader in a community. We've had several different situations that have happened in the city of St. Charles that have enabled me to put some of these leadership skills to the test. The flood of 2007, the fire of the North Star Foods facility, and when we first started out, we had a situation that required us working on some financial information that we need to correct. So my skills are being that mayor, running meetings, being in charge of what the strategic plan is going to be for the community. Also a member of the Mayor's Association. I served as president for a year. Also the chair of the Dover Yoda Sanitary District, which has given me those leadership skills that have helped me deal with people and develop plans for the future.
Rodney?
I've had several leadership positions. I was leader in the Navy on the ship I was on. I also was a leader in Lewiston as chief of police. I had to make out schedules, make sure people were there on time, make sure shifts were covered. So I've had leadership skills there. I also worked with the sheriff's. It was the posse. It's now called the SOAR team. I was their liaison for 10 years while I was with the sheriff's department, and I was their leader during that entire time. I organized searches and rescues. I worked with them closely on training and everything like that. So I have had several leadership positions during my career.
Thank you. Our next question, we will start with Bill. What are your top 3 priorities for the sheriff's office in the next 4 years?
Well, I've established 5 basic problems that I've identified. And as I'm going out door knocking, I did narrow it down to 3, so thank you very much for that question. I think the number one thing that we're looking at is crime prevention. What we need to do is we need to focus on, how can we prevent some of these crimes from happening? And with the experience that I've had over the last several years in law enforcement, I think that's very important that we look at ways that we can enable the community to help us with some of these situations that are happening. I think the second one is drug abuse by all, whether it's our youth or whether it's other people in the community. And then the third thing that was identified was emergency management. We really need to focus on emergency management and make sure that we are prepared for those disasters. So I think those are my top 3 priorities.
Thank you. Rodney?
Well, right now, my top priority is night supervisors, because right now we have no night supervision in the sheriff's department. There's no lieutenants, there's no sergeants. If we have a crisis going on, we either have to call the sheriff or the chief deputy, and it's a long, drawn-out process. It takes too much time, and it takes too much time away from the call. So I think we need to get back to having night supervisors. When I started there, we had lieutenants. We either need sergeants or lieutenants at night, so these deputies that are working have somebody they can go to and talk to about the problem if they've got an issue with it. I also wanted to have a more open door policy with the sheriff's department. So I'm more open with the public. Have the public come in if they have a problem. Talk to them more. Open up about stuff that's going on in the county. And I want to work more closely with the public in solving crimes. If they've got something they want to give me that'll help solve a crime, I am encouraging people to call in and let us know. That's sometimes the only way we can solve crimes is with the public's cooperation.
Thank you. Gary?
I would have to agree with the shift coverage part. I've talked to some of the people, and that's one of the main concerns is the lack of overnight coverage. You have young officers out on the street, and they have no supervision. And I know working at the police department, we had night shift supervisors, and they were called upon quite often. To stick a rookie officer out on the street or out on a county road and have no support or no coverage, I think you're just looking for trouble. So coverage and supervisors is very important. I think you need to stay updated on technology. The use of audio and visual nowadays with cameras and squads and audio, the technology I think needs to continue to be updated. And then community policing I think is also very important. So the community can feel comfortable with the officers, know them, get to know them, and Not just look at them as somebody who's coming to arrest me or coming when I have trouble, and be somebody who they can rely on being there for them and be a friend.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start again with Rodney. Maintaining a budget has been mentioned in campaign agendas. How much budgeting experience do you have?
Well, I've worked with a budget in the Navy. We had to budget everything in the Navy. We had to watch where we were spending stuff, take care of that budget. In fact, I was one of the main people that worked on the budget with the supply officers. I also worked on a budget in Lewiston as the chief of police. We had to have a budget in place, and we had to make sure that we stuck to that budget as closely as possible without going over it if possible. I haven't done a lot of budgeting with the sheriff's department, but I did work with the SOAR team with their donations and what they got in and how it was spent and where we used it. And that was another one where we had to be careful how we spent it and how wisely we spent it.
Thank you. Gary?
I've dealt with budgeting as far as in my work with the American Legion baseball program, being the business manager the last 5 years, and coaching also, dealing with the budget there, making sure we had enough money to pay the umpires, equipment, and do all that stuff. I also have worked at St. Mary's University in campus safety, where I dealt with the budget, was in charge of the budget, as far as ordering equipment, maintaining vehicles, and stuff like that. And also at the police department, not a whole lot of contact with the budget. That basically was the chief's job, but assisted on some things there where there may be a need to order equipment or what have you.
Thank you. Bill?
Part of being mayor is the responsibility of budgeting, and that's something that I didn't take lightly, because one of the things that I'm doing is I'm one of the stewards of your money. We had a $7 million budget, or we have a $7 million budget with the city of St. Charles, and it's very important that when you're budgeting money, you're very, very careful about what you're spending that money on, first of all, and then second of all, you got to make sure that you stay within that budget. All too often we can scribble something on a piece of paper and say, whoops, we went over. When we're talking about budgets, especially in government, it's very, very important you stay within those budget guidelines. For the last 10 years, that's exactly what we did in St. Charles. In addition, we had the Dover Yoda St. Charles Sanitary District budgeting experience, where we had a significant budget, but one of the things that they wanted to do is increase that budget to $15 million. Unacceptable in my book. We needed to find a better solution, and we were able to reduce that down to $1 million project. So budgeting is very, very important.
Thank you. The next question, we will start with Gary. What education on drugs in the county would the department provide to the public? Would this involve newspapers, forums, classes, what?
I guess I would have to get into that position and then see what is all there at this time. I'm not real familiar with what they have at this time. There's a variety of ways of doing that, like you say, whether it be through newspapers or other things, or getting back to the community policing, making contact and making people aware of what's there. And honestly, without being in that position, I would have to say I'm not real sure what is there and what they need, but that would be something when you get into that position, then you could maybe create your own plan of attack as far as how you want to curb the drugs and stuff like that.
Thank you. Bill?
Being the DARE officer for 15 years, I have quite a bit of experience of what we need, in my opinion, for the youth of Winona County. We had established a very comprehensive drug prevention program in the 5th grade, 8th grade, and 10th grade. And currently, that's been significantly reduced to just 5th grade. One of the things that I've done is I've joined a group called ASAP, which is the Winona County Alcohol and Substance Abuse Program, which is working with Winona Health to try to develop a drug-free community grant. And that's something that we need to pay very close attention to and participate as much as we possibly can in. Because if we can reduce the number of students, young people, that are using drugs and alcohol, sometimes we can take care of the big problems by taking care of the small problems right away. So what I would recommend is developing, in cooperation with this organization, ASAP, a program that will teach our young people the harmful effects of drugs.
Thank you. Rodney?
I'm another one that would have to get into the position to see what's available and what I could do with that. I know right now, I believe Mark Dungy has been doing some of that within the community. I know I've talked to Kate Rusher, and they've been going to the high schools and talking to some of the kids about this, so I know that they are doing something, but it's another thing that I would have to get into and look at and see what's going on.
Thank you. Our next question, we start with you, Bill. The sheriff is responsible for issuing carry permits. That would be guns. Do you feel that the current system and fees are appropriate, or should it be modified to be more or less restrictive?
That is the responsibility of the sheriff to issue the gun permits, and it's pretty simple. It's laid out in law what are the requirements that these individuals that want to have this permit to carry. So just following the state guidelines is, I think, the simple answer that you're going to do. If the state says we should be issuing to these people that meet the requirements, then I'm not sure that myself as the sheriff needs to stand in the way. To answer the second part of your question, are the fees appropriate? I think what we should be charging is exactly what it costs us to produce that permit. I believe right now it's $100. I'm not quite sure that $100 is the adequate amount that we should be charging. What we should be charging is exactly what it costs to issue that permit, whether it's $10 or $20 or whatever. I think we need to do assessment to find out what that actually costs manpower.
Thank you. Rodney?
Oh, I agree with Bill. It's set out in law how we can handle that. I used to issue gun permits in Lewiston as the chief of police, and it's stated in law, and the law covers it. You do a background check on every candidate, an extensive background check, make sure they haven't had any psychological problems in the past or anything like that. So the law is very clear on what you have to do in order to issue a gun permit. As far as the fees go, I agree with Spitzer, Deputy Spitzer, or Bill Spitzer, that it needs to be appropriate for what it costs. If it costs the county $150 to process the gun permit, then it should be $150. I don't think they should be charging $500 for a gun permit if that's what they're charging. Right now, I don't know what they're charging, but it should be appropriate with what it costs the individual, or what it costs the county to do all this work.
Thank you. Gary?
I would have to agree with these guys. The big thing with the gun permits and that is the background check. Make sure that is thorough and done. You don't want to be issuing it to somebody who, maybe has some mental health issues, or who you've had some problems with, is carrying a felony record or what have you. So as long as the background check is done, and it's done the right way, like they said, the state law basically mandates that. And the fee agreeable should be, what it's taking to go with that. You shouldn't be overcharging on that. So I would have to agree along the lines of what they've said.
Thank you. Our next question, question number 6, Rodney, is for you to start. If castle or stand your ground bills are introduced at the Minnesota legislature, would you support such bills?
That's a real tough question to answer, because I do believe people have the right to protect their property, but I think you have to preface that with how far can they go. As far as I'm concerned, some of the cases I've read, I think the people have went too far. It's not. You need to have something in place where it also make sure that these people are not going way over the line. And I think that, like I say, I agree that you should be able to protect your property and everything, but I think you have to be very careful about how far you're going to protect your property.
Thank you. Gary?
I would agree on that. You should have your right to protect your property, yet there has been cases in Minnesota in the last couple of years I've seen and read where, people have gone overboard. I know a male and female were shot up in a county up north 2 years ago by a male subject who waited in the house for him, basically baited them and waited for him. So, yet you do have the right to protect your property, but yet, there's a fine line there. So, I would have to agree.
Thank you. Bill?
Basically, my job as a law enforcement officer is to enforce the laws, not to make the laws. As the sheriff, my job is not to agree with every single law that I enforce. My job is to just enforce the law. So if the legislature, in their infinite wisdom, decides that they are going to pass such a law, it's not for me to decide if that's a legitimate law or not. I have to enforce whatever law that they send down. I may not agree with it. I believe in standing your ground as well, but I think that we also have to be aware of some of the consequences that could happen if somebody comes in. I can think of late nights when I came in, and I would hope that my dad wouldn't have did anything when I opened the door at 2 o'clock in the morning. It would be horrible. So, like I said, my job is to enforce the law as the sheriff, not to interpret what I believe that law is.
Thank you. The next question, we're going to start with Gary. Recently, Winona County has been involved with the addition of new progressive law enforcement programs, such as the Blueprint for Safety and the Winona Drug Court. Would you continue to support the inception of new programs like these, or would you be in favor of returning to a more traditional law enforcement relationship with the community?
I would continue to support those. I think it's good to go up, branch out, and do different things. You can go back to your old ways, if it's working, but it's always good to try different things to progress out and to branch out as a law enforcement unit. Times are changing, whether it's with the technology in law enforcement or the various, different ways of getting ideas across to people. The drug court seem to be working. It's going to take off slowly, but it will work, But there's nothing wrong with trying different things in law enforcement, and then also going back to some of the old school ways, like you say. But the more you can do, the more you can give to your county and to the people, I think is a good thing.
Thank you. Bill?
As I stated in my opening statement, I do agree with the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council's programs that they're currently doing. Are they to the point where we can call them a complete success? I'm not sure. I think that we need to explore as many different options as we possibly can. And I think collaborating with the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council is key. We have a lot of experts on that council that have a lot of great ideas. And I think we need to continue to looking at those great ideas because we have a jail facility of 35 with 48 downstairs in the annex. So we don't have a lot of jail space to be utilized. And I'm sure everyone knows that it costs us around $100 a day to incarcerate a person. So that's a lot of tax dollars per day. So we really need to find other options that we can work on to try to alleviate the problem.
Thank you. Rodney?
I believe we need to keep these programs, and we need to be progressive. We have to keep moving forward because the way the world is changing, if we don't keep moving forward, we're going to fall back and we're not going to keep up with the times. We have to implement these programs and find a way to either get funding for them and to keep moving forward, because if we don't, I think we're going to have more problems down the road if we don't keep these programs in place.
Thank you. Bill, please start with you for this next question. What will you do to promote the prevention of sexual assault and domestic violence? Prevention before the incident happens.
Prevention is key. We need to make sure that we have prevention programs. Like I said, for the last 3 decades, I've been working a lot with prevention programs. And we need to teach students, we need to teach college students, we need to teach the general public about what happens when people are victimized with sexual assault. So I think what we need to develop is a comprehensive training, or not training, but information programs for potential victims. And I think the best thing that we could do is collaborate with organizations like the Women's Resource Center who have expertise in that. That's something that maybe I, as a person or as the sheriff, may not have the expertise. So I think relying and collaborating a lot with the other organizations, the Sexual Assault Interagency Council in Winona County, as well as the Women's Resource Center, and collaborate with those groups to try to develop a strategy, a program.
Thank you. Rodney?
I think one of the key things is education. I think we need to educate people out there about these incidences and let them know that what is happening is not right, and that it shouldn't be happening in this community. It shouldn't be happening anywhere. I think education is a key factor in trying to stop these incidences, and I think the education needs to start early. I think we need to start when they're in grade school, that this stuff is not right, and then if you see it happening, or if it's happening at home, that you need to tell somebody. I feel very strongly about education on these matters, and I think it's one of the best ways to combat some of this.
Thank you. Gary?
I would also say education, and letting people know ahead of time. I've done some public speaking for the athletic teams over at Winona State, and one of the things you talk about is decisions and consequences, and make the right decisions as you're going about. And if people are educated on it, I think they'll make better decisions. Working with the Women's Resource Center, who on a daily basis deals with this type of thing, is very important. I know at the police department we worked closely with the Women's Resource Center on a variety of things, and education is huge. There's no question about it with that.
Thank you. Rodney, we start with you on this next question. How would you respond to violations of regulations and ordinances and statutes by businesses handling frac sand?
Well, I don't know enough about the frac sand industry or the regulations that cover it. That's one subject I probably would have to dig more into, and I'd have to see what the state puts down for regulations and what they're going to pass for ordinances in the county. Right now, I don't have enough knowledge or information that I could even venture a guess as to how I would handle something like that.
Thank you. Gary?
I also have not dealt with a lot of that. I've dealt with some frac sand protests that we've had in town on a couple occasions, unfortunately. But we obviously haven't had a whole lot of that in the city when I was working. And that would, like Rodney said, it would depend on what comes down from the state and what's mandated, and you'd have to look at that and then enforce that as such. But at this point, I have not had a lot of contact with the frac sand.
Thank you. Bill?
A lot of the times, those violations occur within municipalities. Most of those municipalities create codes or ordinances that cover that. Most of those are generally not enforced by law enforcement. They're enforced by state agencies like Minnesota Pollution Control, or actually that local government. But there are things that we as law enforcement can make sure that we enforce, and that is, of course, most of the frac sand is hauled by trucks. We can continue to enforce those regulations that the current state has on trucking industry. We can continue to do that from a law enforcement standpoint.
Thank you. Gary, we start this next question with you. As sheriff, will you aggressively support efforts to limit underage drinking in Winona County?
Most definitely. I think that's something that has been a problem for ages and ages, and it probably will be. You'll never stop it. You try to control it, try to curb it best you can. And once again, education and awareness is something that's very important. I spoke at the high school in the fall to it was called the Breakfast of Champions group. It's high school kids, athletes and stuff. And once again, you try to talk to them and try to get them to believe in the make good decisions, and consequences come with bad decisions, stuff like that. But education is huge with the alcohol, and they get a bit of it in school, through the health education, but, if a law enforcement officer can make an appearance at the high school or in a classroom and talk to them on occasion, I think that's big. And once again, it gets back to the community policing type of thing. But there's most definitely a need to continue the education with alcohol and underage drinking.
Thank you. Bill?
As I stated in my opening statement again, partnering with organizations like ASAP, looking at ways that we can secure a drug-free communities grant, something that's going to look at not only how can we educate our young people about the harmful effects of drugs, but also what are we going to do if they use alcohol or drugs. So we need an enforcement component. So enforcing the underage drinking laws are very important as well. How we do that, a number of different ways. I can remember back when I was working patrol, just aggressively looking for those underage beer parties and making sure that the community members are safe. And it also means, what else do we need to do? And that may be compliance checks to make sure that our liquor establishments are complying with the law. So there's a number of different things, and yes, I would aggressively
Thank you.
enforce that.
Okay, with our next question, we start with you, Bill. As a sheriff, do you feel that it is important to belong to community organizations outside of law enforcement?
Absolutely. I think you develop as a well-rounded individual by being a part of the community. For the last 30 years, that's been a very important component of my life. Being a member of the Lions Club, being a member of the Sons of the American Legion, being a part of organizations like Project Fine, being a member of a number of different organizations, the St. Charles Borromeo Catholic Church, some of the men's groups and things like that in that organization. I think it's very important that you are a part of that because that's actually your conduit on what's going on in the community. In these organizations, people become very, very familiar with you, and they trust you, and they tell you things that maybe the normal Joe on the street might not tell you. So I think being a part of those organizations just makes you part of that community, and I think it's very important to be involved as many as you possibly can.
Thank you. Rodney?
Well, just for starters, on the last question, I didn't get to answer, and I would enforce the law on underage drinking in the county.
Did I skip you? I'm really sorry. We'll give you the time now. Go
No,
ahead.
that's okay. But no, I would enforce it. I would make sure that it was enforced and that education is a big tool in that too. As far as working out with agencies outside the Sheriff's Department, I'm a member of the Eagles Club. I'm also a member of the American Legion. And I think getting involved with these organizations is very good too. It keeps you in touch with the people in the county and the city and lets you work with people on different projects and keeps you involved in what's going on.
Thank you. With the next question,
I didn't get to answer that one.
you didn't get to answer this last one. Okay. See, got me off track. Happens every time. So as sheriff, do you think it's important to belong to community organizations?
Yes, I do. I believe it's very important to be involved in outside organizations. Like I say, I've been a board member on the Warrior Club at Winona State, which we're responsible for fundraising for athletics. You get to know the athletes, they get to know you, and I've got to know some kids and then see them, maybe at a house party or downtown when you're patrolling the street, and they look at you differently. You're not just a police officer, you're an individual to them. You're a person. They know you by name. Coaching baseball for 30 years or 25 years was great. I worked with high school age kids while I was at the police department. And, they saw me in a different light. They saw me on the baseball field as their coach and as their friend and not as, here comes the cop. Or they got to see you in a different aspect. So I think it's very important to be involved in outside things and different things so they can see you in a different light, no question.
Thank you. Okay, Rodney, next question. Now I can go 1, 2, and 3. How will you improve communications between the office of the sheriff and the general public in Winona County?
Well, I would have an open door policy. I think that the sheriff needs to listen to the citizens of Winona County. I don't care whether he agrees with what they have to say or not. He needs to listen to them. If they've got a problem, he needs to be able to listen and handle the problem objectively, not just brush the person off. I believe it's very important to have an open door policy, and that's one of the things I would really push as a sheriff. If somebody has a problem, I encourage them to come in and talk to me. Or if somebody has an idea to make something work better or have stuff that will improve what we're doing, I want to hear it. I'm not afraid to listen to new ideas and bring change to the department if we have to.
Thank you. Gary?
I would agree. Have an open door policy, let them know they can come in and talk to you. Once again, community policing, make sure your officers are getting out in the community. And as sheriff, get out in the community, stop by the farmer and see him. Stop by the businessman and see him. If there's a ball game going on, stop by there and, talk to some of the fans, some of the people. You have to be out and about and visual so they can see you and know that they can approach you and talk to you. I think that's very important.
Thank you. Bill?
Communication is the key. If we don't communicate with the public, then we're not going to accomplish what we want to do. A number of different things that we can possibly do. Those that know me know that I'm very into social media. And I think that's very important that we don't miss out on that age group that utilizes social media. And now it spans an entire spectrum. So making sure that we're up to date on utilizing social media. Improving the website. The website should be something that I can go to gather information myself, because we all live in a very busy world, and sometimes we don't catch the nightly news or we don't catch the radio broadcast. So find a place where we can do that. I think the other thing that's very important is we streamline the release of information to media outlets. We need to find a way that we can get that information out to them so it's easily accessible. And of course, the good old-fashioned community policing. I promised to mention the no-time truck stop because a lot of times that is a great way to communicate with the public just around the coffee table.
Thank you. Before we start with the next question, I'd like to once more remind our TV viewing audience to please call in questions, 457-8280. 457-8280. Okay, Gary, we start with you on this next question. What is the extent of drug use in Winona County, and how would you respond to it?
Once again, I've not worked in Winona County. I've been in the city of Winona. I've had contact with some of the narcotics officers on occasion. But once you got into this position as sheriff, then I think you would have to meet with your investigators, have to get out and meet with the people, and then determine what the problem is, what extent it is at. You don't read a whole lot about it in the paper. Every now and then you'll see a marijuana bust or something with a meth lab. But until I think you're in this position and can get out and see it for yourself, I think it's hard to sit here and say, this is what the problem is and this is what we need to do. Obviously, you need to attack it. You need to be aggressive in your fight and make sure that your officers are out and being observant of what's going on the farms in the county and around the area.
Thank you. Bill?
Can you just repeat it one more time?
Sure. What is the extent of drug use in Winona County, and how would you respond to it?
I guess the really only way that we can monitor or evaluate what the drug problem is through the Minnesota Student Survey that's done in the schools. And that just basically gives us a snapshot of what drug use is happening in the school system. So utilizing the resources that we have, once again, I know you'll hear this ASAP many, many times, but it's an organization that is trying to collaborate and gather a lot of this data that will find that information, and that will enable us to write that drug-free grant and hopefully come up with a strategy to take care of that, or at least address that problem.
Okay. Rodney?
Well, Winona County is no different than any other county or city or in the state or in the country. There's drug use out there. I've assisted on several drug raids that we've done in the county, so I know it's out there. And again, to me, it goes back to education. Education of the public and even in the high schools about the drug problem and the consequences of using illegal drugs. I know that, like I say, it happens in this county and it happens everywhere, and I think we have to keep up with the trends and really keep an eye on this problem and watch it closely.
Thank you. Bill, we start with you with this question. What type of training or professional development do you think is most important that your officers at all levels need, and how would you support such training?
Good question. I guess one of the things that I remember from law enforcement training is that we do an extensive amount of training with firearms, 4 times a year, 3 times a year, or what have you. And I can think back in the 28 and a half years as a law enforcement officer how many times I pulled out my gun and actually fired my gun at someone, which is 0. The one training that we do very little of, or once every 2 to 3 years, is driving. And we drive every single day. So one of the things that I would focus a lot on is focusing on training that we do on a daily basis. Don't get me wrong, firearms training is very, very important, and we will continue to do that. But what we need to do is we need to add in training that we do on a daily basis. For instance, driving. We need to do that on an annual basis at least. Other training that we need to do is kind of established by the state of Minnesota, so we would continue that as well.
Thank you. Rodney?
I think officer training is very important, I think, and we need to keep up with the trends. And I think somebody had mentioned before, one of the things they'd like to see is that we do more ERT training with our ERT team, doing these entries into schools when they have an active shooter. I think we need to be doing more of that in the county. You know, people say, well, it can't happen here. Yes, it can. It can happen anywhere, and it's been happening in other places all over the country. And we've had a couple of incidences in Minnesota where it could have happened, but it was stopped before it happened. I really believe that we need to do more ERT training with our officers on entries into schools when they have an active shooter.
Gary?
I think training needs to be basically across the board. Like Bill said, we've done, a handgun training, and thank God you maybe haven't had to use it in your career, but it's good to be trained on that. Driving is a daily thing, and like Rodney mentioned, schools, that training, but also just defensive tactics for officers, to be able to, on a daily basis, maybe have to take somebody down, handcuff somebody, defend themselves. There's a wide variety of training, whether it be the handgun, the driving, the defensive tactics, but it's something that you need to continue to do, and you need to continue to be up on, and as long as you stay sharp on it, I think you'll be a well-rounded officer. So training obviously is very important.
Okay. The next question, we are going to start again with Rodney. This question is, appointed or elected? Cities hire police chiefs, but counties elect sheriffs. Why should this position be elected?
Well, I waver on that question a lot. I'm not sure it should be elected. I think sometimes it comes down to a popularity contest, and that's not what we want. We want a man that's qualified for the job and that's capable of doing the job. So I'm not always convinced that it should be an elected position. I think it should be appointed. I think that would take maybe a lot of the popularity part out of it. That way, I also think that there's a little more control of what like the chief law enforcement officer, or whatever you want to call him, there's more control over what he's doing and how he's doing it, how he spends money, where he spends money. I think that's one of my issues with some of the stuff that has happened in the county is how the money is being spent and where it's being spent. So I'm sort of torn on that issue. I'm not sure it should be an elected position.
Gary?
I've always wondered also why it is that way. Being in the police department for so many years, that was not an elected position, obviously the chief of police. So I always wondered myself why it was done that way. But, you know, you hope the bottom line is you get the right person in there. And like Rodney said, you hope it doesn't come down to a popularity contest and you get the person that's best qualified or that you feel is best qualified in there, and it's somebody who can do the job, who has the experience, who's a good people person who can go in there and do the job, whether it's an elected or an appointed position. You know, the bottom line is get the right person in there, the right person that can do the job.
Thank you. Bill?
I'm going to differ a little bit. I think somebody along the line, much smarter than I am, decided that it should be an elected position. Now, what those reasons are, I have no idea what those reasons are, except for one. The one that I think is probably the most important one is accountability. The only person that I'm accountable is the 52,000 people in Winona County. So if you don't like the type of law enforcement that the sheriff's office is doing and the trends that we're doing and the way we're handling our business, every 4 years you have a chance to change that leadership. And I think that's important. I think accountability is probably the best answer that I can give of why we want to continue to have an elected sheriff.
Thank you. This will be the final question before we move into your closing statements, and this time we will start with Gary. How would you work with local fire department and emergency services?
I think you, as county sheriff's department, need to have good contact, good rapport with the county most of the volunteer services. You know, whether you train together on occasion for, you know, first aid response, this and that, maybe some accident scenarios where you're training together. I think you need to, you know, have good contact with them. Got to be able to know who those people are. Your deputies should be stopping by the stations, you know, making contact with them, talking to them. You know, you should feel comfortable going on an accident call with Pickwick first responders as much as you are going on an accident call with the Wilson first responders. So if you train together maybe a little bit, work with them, get to know them, I think that makes things run a lot smoother. You may not always agree on the way things should be done, but I think if you get to know them, that's a really big thing. And also with the Winona Police Department, or excuse me, the Winona Fire Department, also get to know those people because you may need their help at times.
Thank you. Bill?
Forming relationships with EMS and fire departments is very, very important. We need to train with those EMS and fire departments throughout the county, but we also must do a needs assessment. The best way that I can explain a needs assessment is over the last 2 months I've had an opportunity to attend a lot of these fire department meetings or EMS meetings and find out what their needs are. And I think that's very important for us as a sheriff's office to find out what their needs and goals and things are. So by doing that, that's going to help us collaborate a little bit more with that agency. So training, very, very important. Attending their meetings. Sometimes we think they should come to our meeting, but I think it's better when you go to their meeting and find out, you know, what their needs are.
Rodney?
I've worked with a lot of the fire departments in the county. I've worked, and the emergency management or emergency services. I've worked with a lot of them on our search and rescues. I've been involved in several of them with them, and I also believe that we need to work closely with these people, and if they've got an idea that will improve what we're doing, I think we should listen to it, and maybe if we can adopt it, adopt it. But like I say, I've worked closely with them. They do a good job, and I think we should be working closely. We should be doing joint trainings. Like I say, I've done joint trainings with just about every fire department in this county with the search and rescue and the ambulance crews on going out and searching for lost people or injured people and treating them in the field and going through all this training with them. So I think it's they're a very important tool, and we need to keep up our contacts with them and make sure we have a good working rapport with all these people because they do an excellent job.
Thank you. Now we'll move to our closing remarks from each candidate, and it's a 1-minute statement, and we'll start with you, Bill.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity, thank the audience, thank the at-home viewers for coming up with these magnificent questions. I think a lot of the questions had to do with the priorities that I'm hearing as well at the doors as I'm doing some door knocking. Crime prevention, very, very important. Drug prevention, very, very important. And the one last thing that I want to leave everyone with is you're going to have the opportunity to select your next sheriff. What are some qualities that you are going to look for? I guess one of the things that I've heard here is leadership skills. Look to the candidates. What are their qualifications? What type of leadership skills do they have? Because the leader of the team is going to be very, very important to the success of the sheriff's office. So once again, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Bill. Rodney?
I also think that, I think it's important that I encourage people to get out and vote. I don't care whether you vote for me or vote for an opponent. I don't care. I think it's important you get out and vote. But I also think it's important that you make an informed decision about who you're going to vote for and why you're going to vote for them. And like I stated before, it shouldn't be a popularity contest. Just because the guy is popular out there doesn't mean he's going to make the best sheriff. I think you need to make an informed decision, and like I say, I encourage everybody to get out there and vote, and it's a privilege to have that right to vote for people, and it's a privilege to be able to pick somebody that you want to run an important position like the sheriff's office. So like I say, if you vote for me or you vote for one of the other candidates, I encourage everybody to get out and vote.
Thank you. Gary?
I'd also like to say thank you for the forum tonight. Thank you for the questions, some good questions. And I would agree, a lot of questions on direction, leadership type of things, where we're going to take this department. It's time for a change. Sheriff Brand is retiring after a long stint. It's an opportunity for somebody to step in and kind of reshape the department, which I think is very important. Dave has done a great job, but obviously, new sheriff in town, time for a change. So hopefully you get out and vote and you feel comfortable with who you vote for, and hopefully the next person that gets in there is somebody who can lead and direct the way Sheriff Brand has done it. That's it. Thank you.
We want to thank all of you candidates for a very informative event, and we also want to thank our co-sponsors, Women's Resource Center and AAUW of Winona, HBC for taping this event. The tapes will be available to City Hall to rerun on the government access channels in the next few days. And that would be on Charter Channel 987 and cable for HBC on Channel 19. We will publish that information, so please check the local media for that when we get them set. We'd like to share one more upcoming primary forum for just the sheriff's candidates. The Women's Resource Center, with support from the League of Women Voters, is doing one at the St. Charles Community Center. It will not be televised, but you're all welcome, August 5th at 7 p.m., and that will be at 7 to 8:30. All of the general forums for the general election forums will be held here in the City Council chambers throughout September and October. We will be having 6 of them. Watch the local media for publicity for the upcoming dates and times of all these opportunities. If you need to become a registered voter, you cannot pre-register anymore online with the Secretary of State. That has closed for primary, but you can register at the polls, so please show up at the polls. The Minnesota League of Women Voters has a website, mnlwv.org. It's a website that will provide you more general information. Please vote on August 12th. Thank you. Have a great evening. Let's thank these candidates.